sent all sorts of medical supplies, including desperately needed masks, over to China. So what we're also learning from this whistleblower claim is the following, and this is according to reporting from the New York Times. Bright, who was the director of the Department of Health and Human Services Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority until his removal in April, said in his formal whistleblower complaint that he had been protesting, and this is important, cronyism within the Trump administration. Look, we've been sharing so many stories of Trump utilizing the office of the president for personal enrichment, for personal gain, in order to give all of his buddies all sorts of goodies, with taxpayers essentially footing the bill. These violations of the emoluments clause in our Constitution should have been taken seriously from the beginning, and it just wasn't. And now we're dealing with a pandemic where tens of thousands of Americans have already died. We're expecting hundreds of thousands of Americans to die. Millions of people have contracted the virus. This is a complete and utter disaster. It's a crisis. And Trump is still using the office of the president in order to enrich himself and his buddies. And so there have been a few examples that Dr. Bright gave in his whistleblower complaint. After I give you those details, I think it's important to also consider whether whistleblower complaints even matter. How many whistleblower complaints do there need to be against the Trump administration for action to take place? Because he has broken the law, he has violated the Constitution. Yes, we had the whole impeachment investigation, which was spurred by a formal whistleblower complaint. And it just seems like all of those efforts really end up nowhere. And when you have a situation where people are dying, it's incredible to me how little these types of complaints lead to change. So, as I noted, the Times did report on this in a very detailed way, and they say questionable contracts based on the whistleblower complaint have gone to companies with political connections to the administration, including a drug company tied to Jared Kushner. So again, we're learning two different things from this insanely lengthy whistleblower complaint. It's 89 pages long. We're learning, number one, that there had been multiple warnings to Donald Trump, to Trump administration officials, to act immediately in order to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 in the United States. The Trump administration clearly didn't take that seriously, even though some of these warnings were as early as January of this year. We're learning that even though the Trump administration was urged to stop sending desperately needed medical supplies to other countries, they continue to do so, including sending desperately needed masks to China in early February. And now we're learning, and I'm not surprised by this at all because we've had multiple examples of it throughout Trump's tenure, that this crisis is being used as a way to help Donald Trump's friends, Jared Kushner's friends, people who are well connected to the Trump administration, essentially profit off of the taxpayers' dime through this crisis. And it's just disgusting. So Bright encountered opposition, according to the reporting, from department superiors, including Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar, when he pushed as early as January for necessary resources to develop drugs and vaccines to counter the emerging coronavirus treatments. Also, at one point, Bright met with Navarro. They both had similar concerns, and during that meeting, apparently Bright urged Navarro to have the government stop exporting the masks. And then there was one other part of it. So they wanted to stockpile remdesivir. I told you about that already. And then there's this final part, which is to develop a Manhattan Project for a vaccine. Trump ignored that, and he's now just implementing, or just recently adopted, the notion of this Manhattan Project, right? Focusing on doing the stay-at-home orders, the testing, the procurement of medical supplies, all of these things Trump was told he needed to do early in the year, and he did not do it. Instead, though, he and his cronies focused on how they could take taxpayer money and grant incredibly lucrative contracts to their friends. That's what's happening. The Trump administration is robbing the taxpayer and at the same time refusing to provide the funding necessary for states to continue operating. And in the main show today, we're going to talk about how various states have now gotten so desperate that they're going to cut Medicaid spending. They're going to cut the services that Medicaid will cover in their state. And that is unbelievably depressing when you consider the fact that 30 million Americans have filed for unemployment already. I'm sure there are more to come. And these are people who relied on their employment not only for income, but for health care. So the Medicaid rolls are going to swell at a time when the federal government refuses to help states with funding, and states have no choice but to end up cutting these programs. This is what we're dealing with. This is what a lack of leadership in the United States looks like. And it means that more and more Americans are needlessly going to die when, in fact, if we had a real leader, we would have been prepared to mitigate the impact of coronavirus.
Diffuser is online and active.
It's just what we're dealing with. And it's just something to keep in mind because we're being robbed, not only of our resources.
Donald Trump recently told Fox News during a town hall that as many as 100,000 Americans are likely to die from the pandemic. And considering the fact that more and more major cities and states have started to prematurely open up shop, even though the virus continues, more people are going to die. 223,000 people could be dead by the end of June, showing how unbelievably incompetent Donald Trump is and how there's been a complete lack of leadership. Now, in response to all of this, there are some Republicans who are speaking out. There is an organization known as the Lincoln Project. They've been putting together some pretty vicious ads against Donald Trump. And what you're about to see is an attack ad involving the way Trump has responded to coronavirus. Take a look.
There's mourning in America. Today, more than 60,000 Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored. With the economy in shambles, more than 26 million Americans are out of work, the worst economy in decades. Trump bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment. And with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in America. And under the leadership of Donald Trump, our country is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
All right, so there it is. Look, the Lincoln Project, I think because it consists of Republicans, people on the right, they put out like the harshest ads, and I really wish the Democratic Party was a little more savvy in doing the same.
There might be news coming about that soon. Stay tuned to the Young Turks. But for now, at least we've got some Republicans on our side and fighting against Trump. Normally, I'm annoyed when the mainstream media normalizes those Republicans who generally wanted a lot of the same things Trump did. But at least Republicans know how to fight and they know how to be vicious. So it's nice to have their help, at least a small portion of them, against Trump, because it seems like Democrats don't know anything but patty cakes. So I'm glad somebody's hitting them. And it was a really clever twist on Morning in America. Of course, that was a famous Reagan ad. And these guys are Republicans. And that was M-O-R-N-I-N-G. And this is M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G. So it's a good twist on it. It's true. I'm surprised he doesn't attack her more. Sometimes what happens is when someone effectively attacks Trump, he actually completely lets it go because he doesn't want to start a fight he can't win.
Totally. 100%. Yeah, when you come at him as viciously as the Lincoln Project does, he doesn't touch it, which I find super fascinating, right? Because they call him out on things that I think most people agree on, including how poorly he's handled the coronavirus pandemic. Jennifer Horn, who's someone with the Lincoln Project, said the following: Americans are not only mourning the loss of each other, they're mourning the loss of their routine, families, and livelihoods. Trump and his administration failed at every turn to take the response to COVID-19 seriously until it was too late. Now we face a collective mourning for the America we once knew. And by the way, she's right in that Trump continues to fail in his reaction and response to coronavirus. There are many Americans right now, average Americans, small businesses, that are suffering because of what this virus has done to the economy. And there's a very simple solution to that. Rather than bail out major corporations that have, squandered their massive tax cuts on stock buybacks and, paying their CEOs giant bonuses, you could, give that money to average Americans who are suffering. But Trump does not want to sign on to that type of relief package. In fact, when questioned about an upcoming relief package, this is what he had to say to Fox News. I told Steve Mnuchin just today, we're not doing anything unless we get a payroll tax cut. That is so important to the success of our country. Let me just explain something to you guys. More than 30 million Americans filed for unemployment because of this pandemic. The payroll tax cut does nothing to help those people at all. Secondly, cutting the payroll tax cut means cutting funding toward programs like Social Security and Medicare, which is what he genuinely wants to do. And so that's what he's got his sights set on. He doesn't care about actually helping those blue-collar working Americans in the middle of the country like he pretended to during the election. And they're going to feel the pain as a result of his mismanagement.
All right, let me give you guys some context and some numbers. So, number one thing that Republicans like to do is income tax cuts or corporate tax cuts. Those are by far the least efficient if you're trying to stimulate the economy or create jobs. Now, we got 30 million people out of work, so theoretically, it should be job one to create jobs. Of course, for Republicans and for Trump, it never is. Job one is protecting the multinational corporations' bottom line. Oh, real Americans, we'll get to you later, or maybe not at all. And so when you do tax cuts, income tax cuts, like Bush did and Trump did, on average, for every $1 million spent, it does create 4.6 jobs. And whether that's efficient enough, that's a good question. Well, let's compare it to other things. So when you do a payroll tax cut, now, Obama did one, for example, but he said it was limited in time because he wanted to make sure that to protect Social Security and Medicare. Because if it was permanent, then it would massively hurt Social Security and Medicare. Now, Trump has not talked about having it limited in time, so that is very, very concerning. Did it stimulate the economy? Yes. Did it work better than income tax cuts? Yes. Instead of 4.6 jobs, it creates 13 jobs for every $1 million spent. Now, they say it's for the middle class, kind of. The income tax cuts, 71% of the benefits go to the top 20%. For payroll taxes, though, 45% of the benefits still go to the top 20%. So it's better than the income tax cuts, but still a big chunk of it goes to the very top. Okay, now, what's the alternative? Well, unemployment insurances. You're going to be surprised by this because it maybe seems counterintuitive, but I'll explain why. When you spend it on unemployment, you create 19 jobs for every $1 million spent. Way better than the payroll tax and nearly 4 times as good as income tax cuts. Okay? Why? Because the unemployed don't have any money because they don't have a job. When they get the money, it's desperately needed. They spend it immediately on things like food and rent. So almost 100% of it goes back into the economy and creates the velocity of money. And so that stimulates the economy further and it creates more jobs. So in this case, the Democrats are saying, hey, why don't we give $2,000 directly to Americans per month? Why don't we give more to the unemployed? Both of those would be direct injections of cash to the people who need it the most and would do the most to stimulate the economy. But the Republicans cannot help themselves. They go, yeah, but that would go to the people who actually need it, the unemployed. Yes, it would create more jobs. Yes, it would be better for Trump's reelection, by the way, if the economy was stimulated. But damn it, I just don't want to give it to people who need it. I still want nearly half of it to go to the top. So after I'm done with the income taxes, I'm going to do payroll tax. And plus, I get the extra benefit of it might destroy Social Security and Medicare. So that's the game that's being played right now.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube.
The Trump administration continues to exploit the coronavirus for political purposes, favoring Republican states while completely neglecting Democratic states or blue states. Before I get to that, though, I think it's also important to note that Trump is specifically shutting out members of the coronavirus task force from being able to testify before House committees. But that's not the case when it comes to the Senate, which is, of course, controlled by the GOP. The Associated Press shared the details of this story, saying no member of the administration's coronavirus task force can agree to testify on Capitol Hill unless the invitation is expressly approved by the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. Given that competing demands in these unprecedented times, it is reasonable, according to the White House, to expect that agencies will have to decline invitations to hearings to remain focused on the COVID-19 response, including invitations to participate in multiple hearings on the same or overlapping topics. But I really want to emphasize that they are rejecting requests from lawmakers in the House, but they are fulfilling the request when it comes to the Senate because the Senate is controlled by the GOP. The memo follows a recent White House move to block Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, from testifying before a House panel while allowing him to appear the following week at a Senate hearing. CNN has more details on this story, including, what the possible motivations are. I think you can probably figure that out. But let's hear what Jim Acosta had to say.
Even though the president and other top aides have touted their response to the pandemic, sources tell CNN the White House is moving to limit coronavirus task force members from testifying at congressional hearings. That means fewer hearings featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Deborah Birx, though Dr. Fauci is scheduled to appear before a GOP Senate-led committee next week. Fauci had been requested over in the Democratic-led House, but that request was denied. So, Wolf, does beg the question. The president says he's doing a spectacular job with this pandemic and the response to the pandemic. Why won't they let Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and others from the task force say that up on Capitol Hill?
So this is a problem because, first off, we're in the middle of a crisis, and politicizing it in the way that the Trump administration has is devastating because we all need to be on the same page in order to combat this. But secondly, the reason why you have this task force with these health experts to begin with is because they're able to answer incredibly important questions that lawmakers need answers to in order to keep their constituents safe. And Trump, again, is politicizing this as a way to give Democrats a middle finger, give blue states a middle finger, while doing all sorts of favors for Republicans.
So the ostensible reason and excuse was, my God, they're so busy they can't do this. Obviously, that makes no sense given what Anna told you that they're going to the Senate. But, Trump, he can't help himself. He's got verbal diarrhea, so he's going to blurt out the real reason. So they asked him about it, and he said, because the House is a setup.
Let's just go to that quick video. It's a little bit of chopper talk, unfortunately, but here he is giving his ridiculous reasoning.
Because the House is a setup. The House is a bunch of Trump haters. They put every Trump hater on the committee, the same old stuff. They frankly want our situation to be unsuccessful, which means death. And our situation is going to be very successful. Dr. Fauci will be testifying in front of the Senate, and he looks forward to doing that.
Mission failed. All friendlies have been neutralized.
But the House, I will tell you, the House, they should be ashamed of themselves. And frankly, the Democrats should be ashamed because they don't want us to succeed. They want us to fail so they can win an election, which they're not going to win.
Okay, so that was already bad enough. I'm not going to give you the information because I don't want to answer to Democrats. I mean, look, guys, I know we've gotten used to the insanity of Donald Trump, but if any other president did this in a national crisis, it would be unbelievable. If during World War II, FDR was like, oh, the Republicans are haters. I'm just not going to give them any information about the war. Okay, people are like, what are you talking about? You have nothing to fear but the haters. I'm very afraid of them. I won't let them testify. I mean, all of this is absurd. You have a stupid clown as president, and so he does stupid things, including now the latest news, saying, you know what, we're going to start shutting down the task force completely.
As early as this month, while we're still seeing more and more people contracting the virus, we haven't had a single day where the death toll was under 1,000 people for over a month. And the Trump administration is now talking about winding down the coronavirus task force in an effort to prematurely open the country back up. That, you know, really, that's one other part of the story that I think needs to be emphasized. Yes, there's the politicized component of it. We're seeing that from the Trump administration. But what Republicans are on board for is to prematurely open the country back up to get the economy going. And if you have Dr. Anthony Fauci answering valid questions from Democrats who understand the severity of this virus, well, Fauci's likely to tell them the truth about what's happening and how unbelievably irresponsible it is to prematurely open the country back up. And so that's why I think Trump is really like blocking health experts from speaking to congressional committees.
Okay, so, and as usual, of course, terrible communication on this, blundering, buffoonish management as usual. So reporters asked Dr. Fauci, hey, is it true that the task force is winding down? And he says, quote, not true, no. He said, I've been in every task force meeting, and that's not what they're doing. Turns out they didn't tell Fauci. They didn't tell Fauci that it's winding down. So Trump administration official told the New York Times the task force will be winding down as the White House moves towards phase one of Mr. Trump's plan to open up the country. So it is true. They have confirmed it. It's a task force on a disease that we are in the middle of right now. It's like taking Eisenhower off the battlefield in the middle of World War II and saying, okay, we're wrapping up, mission accomplished, this thing's done, before we even get into Europe. It's unreal. He's leaving the battlefield. He's such a coward. He's so incompetent. And I can't stand the media anymore having debates. Oh, well, I wonder if Trump's was a little late. I wonder if it had an effect. Of course it had an effect. We have 72,000 dead. We lead the world by a huge amount. Italy's number 2 at 29,000 deaths. I understand, but the per capita situation, our per capita situation for the rest of the world is a disaster in number of deaths and number of cases. The number of cases, we nearly triple and nearly quadruple the second largest country with cases. And why? Because he sat on his hands for 2 months. And so South Korea had testing within 2 days.
Like
2 days. We still don't have adequate testing in America. And we're having a debate as to whether this is right or not. And now he's taking his health officials and disbanding them and saying, no, we're going to have no task force at all because this thing's solved already. They're saying now soon we will have up to 3,000 deaths a day. That is a 9/11 every single day on Donald Trump's watch while he's hanging a mission accomplished banner.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support.
Twitter has officially locked Candace Owens' account because of the misinformation she's been spreading regarding coronavirus. Now, here's what she had posted. This was the offending tweet. Apparently, Governor Whitmer from Michigan believes she's a duly elected dictator of a socialist country. The people of Michigan need to stand up to her. Open your businesses, go to work. The police think she's crazy too. They're not going to arrest 10 million people for going to work. Now, Twitter decided to suspend her account as a result of that tweet. And Owens later complained to Gateway Pundit. Twitter has locked me out of my account, but has decided to omit which of their policies I have violated. Apparently, encouraging citizens to go to work is a violation, but Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez encouraging workers to boycott and protest is not. So let's just dismantle that argument for a second. First of all, let me just note that Twitter did give her a reason for why they suspended her account. In fact, the screenshot that she shared with the public noted at the very bottom, right, because she screenshotted the message from Twitter, that she had violated the guidelines for the social network platform, and then you had to click a button to see the exact reason. And later, Twitter did clarify to reporters why she was banned, and it's because, let's go to the tweet. Twitter spokesperson to the Daily Dot on Candace Owens' tweet, the tweet violated Twitter's COVID-19 misinformation policy, specifically around heightened risk health claims. So we know why she did it. Like, we know why Twitter did this, and we know what she's trying to do. And so she makes herself out to be like some poor little victim, when in reality, we're dealing with a pandemic where hundreds of thousands of Americans at this point are expected to die. And we don't need her misinformation and her nonsense pot stirring to make it worse. And as always, Candace Owens and bad faith actors like her will take a crisis and somehow make it about them, as if they're the real victims here.
Yeah. And all of conservative Twitter joined in. Oh, boo-hoo, First Amendment. Real quick, as always, let's point out that they can't stand the First Amendment. They support a president who says that the press is the enemy of the people. They attack the media nonstop, not to make them better, but to destroy them. Huge distinction between the right wing and the left wing. And then they also are for laws that punish you if you disagree with Israeli policies, not even American policies, Israeli policies. They agree with laws banning protesters against oil companies, and even some laws that would run over protesters if they dared to oppose a multinational corporation. So these are the world's largest hypocrites. They have no love for the First Amendment. All they want to do is to be able to say outrageous things that might hurt people, not hurt their feelings, actually get them in this case, into a health crisis and endanger their lives. And anytime you say, hey, can you not endanger people's lives or say outrageously bigoted things, they cry, oh, I'm the victim. So their act is tired, but the press feeds into it and does 50-50 nonsense when every time they should be slapped across the face, proverbially, verbally, rhetorically, with their own hypocrisy, which the press almost never points out.
Yeah, and one other thing that they're certainly hypocrites about, more and more videos are surfacing of these anti-lockdown protesters getting into the faces of police officers, yelling at them, screaming at them. What happened to, some of the rhetoric that they used against Black Lives Matters? What happened to respecting police officers, right? I thought that it was unacceptable under any circumstance to ever be disrespectful to a police officer. Now you see all these white protesters up in their faces yelling at them and shouting all sorts of obscenities, but that's okay, right? All of a sudden that's fine.
So when you talk about the classic limitations of the First Amendment, because all of our rights have some bounds to them, the example that's used is don't yell fire in a crowded theater. You're not allowed to do that. The authorities, the government and the police, are allowed to stop you from doing that because it endangers people's lives. Well, this is worse than yelling fire in a crowded theater. This is spreading coronavirus in a crowded theater. And the government has said don't do that, and the police's job is to enforce that. So when Colin Kaepernick takes a knee, protesting things that have not been sanctioned by the government, but when the police shoot unarmed black people, and he says, well, that's a violation, and they shouldn't do that, and that's outrageous, they go, how dare you? Take your shooting and like it. You are not ever allowed to challenge the cops. when the cops are actually doing something within the bounds of their job, they get in their face, they yell at them, possibly spread coronavirus to them, and then say to the rest of the population, as Candace Owens does that with that tweet, don't listen to the cops, who cares? Disrespect them and the government and do whatever the hell you want. These people never mean a single thing they say. All they care about is my privilege. I want to be able to do what I want and to oppress anyone I like. They should just own up to what their actual ideology is.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback.